Okay, we are now at our final chapter of core purpose. Up until this point, we've talked about where we've been, some of the things we need to do, some of the tools that we need to apply in order to change the composition of how we're getting forward. And now we're at the point where we're saying, okay, now that we've worked through some of these issues as it's moving us towards our future, let's find out what we're actually leaving behind. Okay, like with every chapter, I start with a story, and this is no different. And this is, of course, a true story. This is a story of two brothers that I knew, Jack and Lyle. And Jack and Lyle decided that they were going to go to Liberia, Africa, and rebuild some schools and maybe some churches to help some of the local communities. And so they went overseas and started working there. Now, if you're not familiar with the history of Liberia, I'll just kind of tell you a little bit about it. It was actually settled by free slaves from America. And so some of the words that they have to identify their capital, like Monrovia, excuse me, sounds like some of the names that we had here in America. Excuse me, I'm going to have some coffee. And so they decided that they were actually going to go and work in this area. But the problem is that there had been a civil war going on for about 25 years. And so they weren't thinking in terms of, well, it's not a good idea to try to build in a time of war, because it doesn't work, as we've already learned. So they decided to go ahead and give it a try. So they went to Liberia. Well, when they got there, they had a Land Rover and they were driving through the countryside. And what they didn't realize is that there were some rebels that were looking at them through some binoculars. And so they saw these two guys driving this Land Rover, and they thought, let's get them, okay, because they probably have stuff that we want. So the rebels intercepted the Land Rover. The soldiers got out. Of course, Lyle and Jack are like, their hands are up saying, oh my gosh, don't move. These guys have weapons, and these guys had machetes, and they had rifles and pistols and machine guns. And so they grabbed the men from the scruff of their neck, threw them on the ground, and put the guns to their head, and confiscated their vehicle and all their possessions, and then took them to another location. And so this other location had clearly been a site where there was a lot of battles, because it was riddled with bullets. Part of it had been blown out, and it was just really in bad shape. And these guys, these two brothers, had to walk into the building with their hands like this, and then they were instructed to kneel like this while the leader started going through all their belongings. And so while the leader was going through the belongings, the men could hear some of the discussion, and these guys, the soldiers, were saying, hey, let's just go ahead and kill them. They don't belong here, so let's just go ahead and kill them. And so, but the leader was like tearing apart the lining from the inside of the luggage and going through everything. And you could see that he was really getting frustrated. And so it was like, why was he going through the luggage? What was he really looking for? Well, he probably was looking for something that might have been illegal, like drugs or weapons or something, where they could justify actually killing these two men. It's one thing to, just to kill somebody in battle, but if you're killing visitors, you want to make sure you have like a good reason, apparently. And so if they wanted these guys to, wanted to see if they had something illegal that would justify them killing these guys. And so Lyle and Jack were there, and they were thinking, that my life is flashing before my eyes. I know I'm not going to make it out of here. This is going to be the end of my life. It's going to end here, and this is how it's going to end. Well, the leader continued to go through all their possessions and got really frustrated. And he finally looked over and he looked at Lyle and he said, who are you and why are you here? And Lyle still had his hands up and he said, my name is Lyle Hall, and this is my brother, and we're here to build churches and schools. And suddenly, everybody got quiet. And the leader said, Lyle Hall? Lyle? Was your father Gary Hall? Was your father Papa? And Lyle said, yes. And suddenly you could hear people laying down their weapons. And the leader went up to him and he said, Lyle, my brother, don't you remember me? Here's what happened. 25 years before this, Lyle's dad and the whole family, they were missionaries in Liberia. And a civil war broke out. And Lyle's dad went running through the different villages, and he was telling everyone, flee for your lives. The rebels are coming. And so all these hundreds of people began to flee. And one of them was this leader. 25 years before, Lyle's dad did an act of kindness and bravery. And in the future, 25 years later, it saved the life of both of his boys. Oh my gosh, that's mind-boggling. 25 years into the future, something he did in the past saved their lives. And that's what legacy looks like. That's why it's so important to consider, how are we going to change our past? What are we going to actually do? What are the deeds that we need to do today that will alter my past and ultimately into my future? His dad did exactly what we've been talking about 25 years before, saved their lives 25 years later. That's what it means to build a legacy. You don't know whose life you're going to save. Maybe one of your children, maybe a grandchild. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what they're going to come up with? A cure for something, a solution for something. We don't know that. Your life matters. Your life is about living your purpose, not only for your personal enjoyment and satisfaction, but really for the health of everybody in your life, for those you don't know and those you do know. And that leads us to our next life lesson and our final life lesson. Greatness is not achieved on accident. Greatness is achieved on purpose. Greatness is not achieved on accident. Greatness is achieved on purpose. I want you to think about that. That's a big deal. Let's think about the legacy that we're leaving behind. I'll see you in the next chapter, next session.